Pints with Jack, Season 4, Episode 94, After Hours with Max McLean from Fellowship for Performing Arts. Welcome, everyone. Pints with Jack is your weekly C.S. Lewis podcast where David, Matt, and I break down and discuss the works of C.S. Lewis. We've done the Screwtape Letters, we've discussed the Silver Chair, and now we're just wrapping up the season with some great interviews. And today I'm speaking with Max McLean, the founder and artistic director of Fellowship for Performing Arts, a not-for-profit New York City-based production company producing theater and film from a Christian worldview to engage a diverse audience. In his various roles at FPA, Max McLean has adapted for stage the Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis on stage, The Most Reluctant Convert, The Great Divorce, as well as performances of the biblical books of Genesis and St. Mark's Gospel. Max received the Jeff Award, Chicago Theater's highest honor, for his performance of Mark's Gospel. His recent writing and producing credits also include Martin Luther on Trial. He has also memorized and performed Lewis's most famous sermon, The Weight of Glory, which I had the privilege of seeing both from the original pulpit where Lewis preached the sermon at the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin in Oxford, and also saw it in Texas. Riveting. As an actor, Max has created the roles of Mark in Mark's Gospel, the storyteller in Genesis, Screwtape in New York, and on national tour and in London, C.S. Lewis in The Most Reluctant Convert on national tour and in an extended 15-week run in New York, and most recently, a very exciting motion picture I'm sure that he'll share some more about.
I totally loved it. Really powerful.
Amazing.
I just couldn't believe how good it was.
I was completely blown away. It's exhilarating. It was provocative.
Exciting from the beginning to the end.
I felt like it was only 20 minutes.
I was amazed how much energy two cast members could put into it.
The feelings inside that main character seem to be coming out all on the stage.
An ever-increasing craving for never diminishing pleasure is the formula. It's more certain, it's better style to get the man's soul and give him nothing in return.
So Mr. McLean, he was wonderful.
It's one of the most well-done Broadway plays I've seen.
It was very cool. Time well spent. He doesn't even like theater, and he went.
Yes, they do regard death as the prime evil and survival as the greatest good because we have taught them to do so. Do not be infected by our own propaganda.
Everyone should see and everyone should laugh and feel something from it, and at the same time talk about it later. All the buzz about Screwtape Letters is true.
Max McLean, welcome to Pints with Jack, and thank you so much for carving out some time for a rare interview.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Great to be with you.
Listeners, as you may know, I've been honored for the last several years to not only get to know Max, but occasionally to do some work for Fellowship for Performing Arts. And it's always an incredibly rewarding experience, both to see their excellent productions, but also to interact with the audience, large, literate, thoughtful crowds that attend the shows. It's such a privilege to see FPA's work up close and to be involved in any way.
Yeah, that's, I remember the most recent thing you did for us, Andrew, was you did some post-performance Q&As in DC and in Houston following productions of The Great Divorce and the Screwtape Letters. And I want you to know that we received really great feedback from not just the audiences, but the crew and the cast will also listen in quite a bit on these. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, it was such a joy. And like I said, it's so great to see such an engaged crowd, almost no one left. And there were wonderful questions. I actually got a question afterwards from a 13-year-old girl, and it made me try to think on the spot. She said, "Why does Screwtape call him the patient?" And I had to think a moment, and then I realized it's because he's the very opposite of a doctor.
Right.
Right. So
yeah, the patient is someone who, we think of patient someone for healing. Screwtape thinks of a patient as someone for corrupting.
Exactly.
bringing to damnation. Yeah.
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 Well, and that leads us right into our quote of the week about
Okay,
how
good.
Screwtape twists things. So let me read this, and I'd love to get your thoughts about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's from letter 22. He's a hedonist at heart. All those fasts and stakes and vigils and crosses are only a facade, or only like foam on the seashore. Out at sea, out in his sea, there is pleasure and more pleasure. He makes no secret of it. At his right hand are pleasures forevermore. He has filled his world full of pleasures. There are things for humans to do all day long without his minding in the least: sleeping, washing, eating, drinking, making love, playing, praying, working. Everything has to be twisted before it's any use to us. We fight under cruel disadvantages. Nothing is naturally on our side. So living near Times Square and working near Broadway, what do you think of that?
Well, it's a very, very interesting quote. And the context of it's quite interesting too, because it's when the patient has fallen in love with the young Christian woman. And, you know, to bring people up to speed, the patient is the object of Screwtape or Wormwood's attacks, an unsuspecting human on Earth. And so the patient in this case, and I think the patient is a stand-in for Lewis, you know, where he is reminiscing about his own battles with temptation. It comes when the patient has fallen in love with a young Christian woman. And I think that feeling of falling in love is one of the greatest pleasures in the world, regardless of whether you're in Times Square, Broadway, or you're traveling through the Gobi Desert. Really doesn't matter. It's a gift, and it's a gift from God, and it comes from Screwtape's enemy, God. Sure. And, you know, Screwtape can't even say the word love. He can't even say it. So he has to distort it. And the idea of distorted pleasures is a huge theme in the Screwtape Letters, especially the distortion of love. In our play, The Screwtape Letters, there's a little bit when we talk about this where it says, never forget that when we're dealing with any pleasure in its normal, satisfying form, we are on the enemy's own ground. Oh, I know we've won many a soul through pleasures, but it's his invention, not ours. He made the pleasures. All our research thus far has not enabled us to produce one.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, and I love that you mentioned love, because starting in October, we'll be doing season 5, and we're tackling the 4 loves.
Good.
So we'll be leaning right into that. So I think that there's a great connection. Well, I see you taking a sip. For those listeners who can see, I'd love to see the other side of that cup. What have you got there?
Oh, right. Yeah, this cup, we had this made for a donor event that we were doing. Let me see if I can bring it up. And can you see it there? It's, I've got to get
perfect right there.
Yeah.
You can't get a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me. Fantastic.
Yeah, and that's, of course, I exchange tea for, in this case, I think it's Starbucks Verona brand coffee.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, but I take it black, take it strong.
Okay.
And yeah, it gets me through the morning.
That's your drink of the week. I actually started with Cafe Verona, but I've switched to French roast. And listeners, while we record this, it's a little early in the day for a dram of Lagavulin or anything else.
Yeah, but he was going to offer me one, right? You were going to offer me one, right?
I was. In fact, I almost asked you for a cigar of the day. So
yes, well, I told you, yeah, that's good. I'll look forward to our next one.
Absolutely. Well, cheers to you.
Yes, cheers. Thank you.
Right. So, Max, I'm sure our listeners would love to know how it all started for you. Your work in acting, voicing the Bible in several different versions, as well as producing theater and film from a Christian worldview to engage a diverse audience. I know you're on a tight schedule this morning, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about how it all began?
Sure. Well, I'm an adult convert to Christianity. So in my early 20s, I think I was 23. And since I wasn't raised in an evangelical world, I didn't get the memo that Christians weren't supposed to be actors. I was in drama school, living in London, exposed to some of the best theater in the world, saw fantastic productions, and I kept asking myself, why isn't art and theater of this caliber being produced from a Christian worldview? And so that led to, first of all, using my skills and techniques developed in the theater and acting to illuminate great literature, to do theatrical presentations of the Bible. And that was really, the Lord was just so directing our paths for that, because it was like an event waiting to happen. When the first time I presented the Bible in that way, the impact was immediate and profound. And within a very short time, I was on the road maybe 150 days a year, doing memorized presentations of Mark's Gospel, of Genesis, of Acts, Philippians, and in churches, conferences, and colleges throughout the country. And so that was the first step. And then, of course, later we got to doing Lewis productions.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that's exactly leads to the next thing I wanted to ask about. FPA has done a number of truly excellent Lewis projects. Why is there such a close connection between C.S. Lewis and the Fellowship for Performing Arts?
Yeah. Well, it all started with the Screwtape Letters, reading that soon after my conversion. In fact, somebody gave me a copy of Surprised by Joy right after my conversion. Up until that point, all I'd read was, in terms of Christian literature, I'd read the New Testament and probably some of Proverbs. And I had read the Brothers Karamazov. I read it before I was converted, and then I read it again after I was converted, because I think that book had a very deep impact on that led to my conversion. So anyway, this person gave me Surprised by Joy, and I read it from beginning to end, but I didn't understand a word of it. I mean, it was way went by me like a freight train. And then this person gave me Screwtape Letters, and letter one, the man in the British Museum, I was smitten. I said, I know this guy. I know him. And it was really quite a revelation, because one of the great wiles of the devil is to try to convince us he doesn't exist, and so that's certainly where I was as an unbeliever. And one of the great insights of having the scales come off was to realize, first of all, I was loved by God and hated by his enemy and deceived. So the Screwtape Letters gave me a real picture of spiritual warfare in a way that I wouldn't have understood prior to that.
Oh, it's marvelous. And, in doing my book, Mere Christians, I found that was one of the, probably a third of people kind of came to Lewis impactfully through Screwtape. And, that book continues to speak as we've seen, our listenership and our downloads this year have just grown. So,
yeah.
In terms of productions, I went to see Screwtape as soon as I heard about it, and a couple of years before we met. Actually, we met the day that I first saw Screwtape. I messaged you on Facebook, and you were generous in the green room to answer back, and we got to meet that day.
I remember. Yeah, you made quite an impression, Andrew.
I'm soft-spoken and introverted. I'm sure everybody has known that. So, in my course studying Lewis, I've seen a bunch of C.S. Lewis productions, and without putting too fine a point on it, the quality of them can range fairly widely. What are some of the challenges that you have faced in getting a really good production done, as FPA has done? How do you do it with such excellence?
Oh, Lewis is so hard. He's so hard. He's so dense. He delivers ideas and imaginative insights that most of us have not thought about, or at least not thought about in the way he does.
Sure.
So you want to get those without losing your audience. And of course, the challenge is he didn't write for theater, which was, which theater has to hit immediately. Right. But he's so interesting that you want to do the work to excavate the beauty and the brilliance of his insights and language within the context of a story. So you're always second guessing yourself. His story structure is pretty simple, but that's what he hangs his ideas on. So you really want to hang on to the story structure as much as you can, but you want to just find the right platform for the insights that he has. And of course, he works so well with spoken language, as you and I both know. So I think the great trick is to speak it well. And so that's where we spend a lot of our time. We don't shy away. One of the things I was concerned about when I saw some of the films was there was a little bit, they wanted to get to the action without the insights and the brilliance, and I think in some cases it missed the mark. So that was where we really, I think, emphasize our work.
Yeah, that narrative arc, and I've been privileged on a couple of occasions to see a little bit about how the sausage gets made in some of these productions. In reflecting on it too, I hadn't thought about this until you were speaking just now, but I think that one of the real hallmarks is not only the narrative, but all of the plays that I've seen are funny and crucially funny at a moment that really kind of moves the drama along. Is that deliberate?
Well, he's funny. He's very, and it's a little dry. He's such a highbrow that you do have to set it up properly, and that takes some time to find. But once you do, the payoff is tremendous. And he says what he says of Chesterton. His humor was the bloom of his argument, and I think that's a real. You don't want to miss that.
Yeah. Well, and
because he's not trying to be funny, he's not trying to tell jokes.
Right.
It's part of the message.
It's a delighted cleverness. I've heard Doug Gresham comment that the thing that most of the biographers miss about Lewis's life is the consistent sound of laughter that was always present in the house. That's great. Well, I read a little bit about this on the FPA site, which I commend to our listeners. But can you tell me a little bit about what happened when COVID hit? That kind of got in the way of your plans. Didn't you have like 3 or 4 productions on the road?
Well, we got clobbered. We really did. It sort of blindsided us, because I think the whole country was in denial about it.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, they sort of said that, well, we can't deny it anymore. And so they began this shutdown process. And of course, it was for us, March 15th, it all stopped. But we thought it was going to be short, 15 days to flatten the curve. Remember that?
Sure.
And I thought back then, I said, well, what am I going to do for 2 weeks? And then of course, and everybody said, oh, we'll be back in May and back in June. And in fact, we canceled quite a few events, but we rescheduled them for the summer. And then June, July, and then August. And then we realized, boy, this is going to be long. And that really hit us hard. We had 3 shows on the road. We were just about ready to end our Screwtape tour in Colorado Springs. We had the Great Divorce in Houston. Most Reluctant Convert had just done an event at Full House at Northwestern University, and we were just about to go to the University of Michigan to have another Full House there. And then we just finished an adaptation of Paradise Lost in New York. So we were moving roughly 2,000 tickets a week, and then all of a sudden we're down to 0, and stayed there for the rest of the till now. Sure. But thankfully, it looks like we're back on the road beginning. This August. We're going to go back, and then we've got a tour all fall. Of the Great Divorce through December, and then we're starting to book the spring as well, the winter and the spring as well.
Excellent. Yeah, we're recording here in July, but this episode airs at the end of August. And so by then, some folks will already have gotten to see you all. Are you going to do a season again in New York or not this year?
Not this year, but we do anticipate we'll do one in the future. Yeah.
And that's
New York is still, New York's a very wounded city right now. And so, you know, the hospitality, the arts economy, the creative economy, plus hospitality are probably the largest employers in the city when you combine them, you know, with tourism, and that got hit so hard. I mean, it's bigger than finance, bigger than tech, bigger than healthcare in terms of number of people employed, and so it's going to take a while for that to come back. Broadway is going to begin opening slowly in September. I mean, there's a show open. I think Bruce Springsteen is on now, and there's one other show might open in August. But there's going to be a staggered opening all the way through the end of the year, and then we'll be able to judge, you know, how that goes.
Sure. Well, for listeners who don't know, for the last several years, FPA has done a season in New York for a couple of months or so.
Yeah, we've done as long as 4 months. Sometimes as short as 6 weeks, but we try to have a presence in the city. Yeah.
That's great. Well, and we're all looking forward to 2022. I know that Northwind Seminary is doing their Oxford pilgrimage in June, and then the C.S. Lewis Foundation is there in July doing Oxbridge Conference again. And so we have real high hopes for 2022.
Yeah, and I plan to be at Oxbridge. I hope to see you there.
Let's plan it again. We had a wonderful pint with Malcolm and Andrew Peterson, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Malcolm's local. So fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Screwtape Letters because we're finishing up this season. Yeah. We're finishing up the 4th season. How closely does and I'm asking you a question I know the answer to on a firsthand basis, but tell us about how closely your production of Screwtape compares to the actual book and what you did with that.
Well, it's pretty close. I mean, if you read the book from beginning to end, it's about 6 hours. You know, or an audio book is about 6 hours long. I don't think people want to stay that long in the theater. So, but we do touch on 24 of the 31 letters. We certainly have an interpretation of the book for dramatic purposes. We see it as a predator-prey story. That follows 2 story arcs. What happens, you know, predator being Screwtape, the prey being the patient. And so we follow 2 story arcs. What happens to the patient who begins the play as perhaps spiritually indifferent. And by the end of the play, he's quite devout in spite of the fact that Screwtape's trying to ruin him for the entire process of the play. And that's, of course, due to the presence of the real protagonist in the story, Screwtape's enemy, God. Yes. And then the second arc, the more theatrical arc, is what happens to Screwtape, who begins the story as this kind of master of the universe personality, loves the way he looks, loves the way he talks, loves the way he dresses, smartest guy in the room. He's just pure pride. And then by the end of the play, he's a defeated devil. And that too is due to the presence of his enemy, God. So the real protagonist in the play and in the book is God himself.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I love watching that as the hair and the clothes get messier throughout the production. It's great. And I remember taking a question from the audience about why it feels so contemporary. And I would always remark, well, that's because of the amount that you changed from Lewis's actual words. Wasn't it like 2 words?
Yeah, like nothing. So, and the only thing we did, I mean, there was a couple of things we did change the German War, World War II, to I think Acts of Terror, which is I think is more universal. Right. And I think in the preface of the book, Lewis says something. Either Lewis or Screwtape says something. The fact that humans go to war is of no interest to us except how it affects the patient. So that felt like a change that was really immaterial. And then, of course, some of the things like the clicker, the dance, sure. Those were just visual helps, right? Because we didn't change the words. The words were the same.
Yeah.
We just added some sort of visual interest that allowed the audience to make the connection, because what Lewis was dealing with was, the seven deadly sins, and those haven't changed.
Yeah, no, they haven't, nor has God's grace and his mercies for us.
Right.
So thank him for that. No, I loved that. And I love how 80 years on, that book still feels very contemporary, because Lewis was looking at the eternalities of the human heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great. I was privileged to see you in that role, which you inaugurated, and it's now portrayed by the excellent Brent Harris. How did that come about?
Well, you remember I'd mentioned early on that Screwtape was a real early influence in my Christian walk.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I kind of parked it. I mean, not so much Screwtape, but sort of Lewis, because Lewis was work, and so, but then I was doing one of my other shows, and this theater professor from Madison, New Jersey, at Drew University, saw my work, and he was really impressed, and he said, I think you would make a really good Screwtape. And I didn't know if that was a compliment or not. But I was intrigued because of the earlier experience, and he had an idea how to do it. And I said, well, if we can get the rights from C.S. Lewis Estate, we'd have a go of it. And that was back in 2004, 2003, some way back when. And so we got to work on it sometime in 2005 and kept working on it. And I felt like it took a while to crack the code, but once we did, it really found an audience.
Absolutely. 500,000 people who have seen it, right?
At least, yeah.
And at least one Supreme Court justice, I've heard. And
yeah, well, sure. Yeah, we had, I'm aware of at least, not Scalia.
Alito?
Sam Alito came. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And when we first did it, we had a lot of high elected officials, Ed Meese and various senators and congressmen come, and I was really said, whoa, this is interesting.
Well, and that's one of the things that struck me so much the first time I saw the show, first and second time I saw the show. It was in a major theater in Houston, and here's a room full of not necessarily Christian people, and you're pointing out their sins and flaws, and they're laughing at themselves. And I thought, man, if anything is evangelism, that presentation of the gospel where you can hold up a mirror to our own shortcomings and help us see. I just thought that was brilliant, and I love what Brent does in the role too.
Yeah, he's terrific, and we did a tour that began in 2018, and it began in New York actually, where we ran the show. And interesting, Newsweek magazine selected Screwtape as one of the best New York productions of the year.
Wow.
So that was terrific. Then we toured it all of 19 and into 20. And we had intended to, what we tend to do with these tours is we run them for a year or so, put them into bed for a bit, and then bring them out again in a couple of years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When we can get a new audience.
Well, or a repeat audience,
Or a repeat audience, yeah.
Lewis talks about the joys of rereading a book.
Yes.
So, and it's fantastic to see again and again. I love the Drew University connection, because Northwind Seminary was started by Rob Duncan and Michael Christensen and a couple of others from Drew.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
good, solid Methodists.
Absolutely. So I want to switch gears from what has come behind to press on to what's coming forward. I understand FPA is working on its first movie. And in fact, you sent us graciously the trailer for Most Reluctant Convert, which our listeners can see online. What can you tell us about the Most Reluctant Convert film project?
Well, it's also a byproduct of the shutdown. We had to pivot. So, we did pivot to virtual productions. We did Great Divorce virtually, which got a huge audience. We did Shadowlands virtually, which was very well received.
Loved that.
And then we also did Martin Luther on Trial virtually, and we did a Christmas program and an Easter program. So we did a lot of virtual work. And that was it was wonderful how people responded to those. Then we, I had been working. I had contacted my friend Norman Stone. I don't know if people know who Norman is. Norman is a Scottish filmmaker. Man I've respected afar since I first saw his BBC version of Shadowlands in the mid '80s.
Fantastic version.
That film was the relationship and marriage of Lewis and Joy Davidman that became the Broadway play, that became the feature film with Anthony Hopkins and Deborah Winger. And FPA did the first New York revival of that in 2017. Norman and I met about 10 years ago. And at a Christian arts conference, we were both speakers and hit it off immediately. Since then, we've met a lot of times, throughout, and he comes to New York quite frequently. We have dinner, we talk. And so, he loves the Lord. He has the same, loves the arts, loves C.S. Lewis. He grew up a preacher's kid. The name of the denomination he grew up in is called Strict and Particular Baptist. He said, he says the denomination is so strong, so small that not even God has heard of it. I don't think that's true, because I think it was started by Charles Spurgeon, and one of its leading lights is Martin Lloyd Jones. But he has a vision very similar to mine. He went to art school, was an artistic child, and he wanted to produce excellent films with a Christian perspective. And so he had a 40-year career at the BBC and has made over 100 films. So I sent him our script. I said, can we talk about making this into a movie? He said, yeah, let me look at it. And he really enjoyed The Most Reluctant Convert script. The idea of transformation is very filmic. So we began talking about it, but we saw it as a 22, 23 project. This was back in 19. And then when the pandemic hit in March of 20, things changed. So by June, we were talking, can we make this film? And then he said, well, filmmaking in Britain is opening up in August and nobody's working, so I can get a really good crew.
That's great.
And if you can get the funding, we can begin shooting, as early as late August. So I got my board together and we decided we should do this. We should take advantage of it. So we got the rights to do the film from the C.S. Lewis estate. Next thing you know, I was on a plane, a very empty plane, as big as Air Force One, with fewer people on it, flying from Newark to Heathrow. I think it was August 31st, and then we began filming in mid-September, finished in mid-October, and then we began, did all the post-production. That finished a couple of months ago, and since then we've been working on setting up the distribution.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that, and I love your flexibility and the courage to be nimble and to follow where the Lord leads, and to not despair at the closed door. And it kind of reminds me that, the way that kind of came together so quickly, the way that other things, that FPA has done, that the doors have really opened precipitously. And it reminds me of Lewis saying about Screwtape that nothing was easier for him to write. Although there was great cost involved, right? It said he gave him a kind of spiritual itch, right?
Yeah.
But the Lord's provision in that, I think, is a real sign of his.
Well, it's sort of. I think Screwtape introduced him to America, and it became a huge bestseller. Royalties poured in, which really bothered him.
Well, and the story about that. He gave away all that money, and then the tax bill came. And so fortunately, Barfield stepped in, and one more big check came to take care of that. Otherwise, we may not have heard from him again.
Right.
That's fantastic. Well, we look forward to that. When do you have a rough idea when that comes out?
Yes, we just negotiated with national distribution company for a November 3rd release.
Okay.
And it's we'll be all over the country. I mean, hundreds of theaters in most major markets, even smaller markets. It's by by film standards, it's a relatively small film. You know, it's not a Marvel film by any means. So theaters are a little bit reluctant, you know, to give up space. So they're going to watch it closely, and if we do well on November 3rd, they may extend it. So that's kind of where we are with it. We're happy. We're going to promote it pretty heavily.
Great.
You know, get behind it. But I do think that this has been such a wonderful experience that I think that FPA will be, we're going to go into the film business in terms of we're going to continue doing theater, but I think we're also going to keep doing film.
That's great news for us. Well, you can count on our listeners to put that date on their calendar. You can count on us to pray for you, and then please give us information. We'd be happy to hector theater owners beforehand to say.
Well, you know, it's going to be, you know, it's movie prices, $10 to $15, somewhere in there, and I think if you get a group together, you know, it's probably somewhere around, you know, 20% discount. So it's you know, it's reasonably priced. And then and you know, even if you're in an area that we don't have a theater, let us know. We'll see if we can add a theater. You know, if you can get a group together and say, yeah, we'll see. You know, give you an example. You know, we probably don't have I don't know, let's say Waco, Texas. That may not be on our list. You know, Dallas is on our list, Austin's on our list, Houston's on our list, San Antonio, but maybe not Waco. If you want to do something in Waco, you know, let us know, and we'll see if we can secure a theater, because the theater owners are going to benefit from that. You know, if they know that people are interested, we can open those up.
Great. Well, on behalf of Pints with Jack, I think I can assert to say maybe we can do something in early October just to get word out, and I'd be happy to spread word, you know, on social. You know, there are a lot of big Lewis groups around, and I think that if they know that there's a need and this is an excellent opportunity, we'd be happy to get some of the groundswell going for sure.
Good. And you know, the interesting thing about the story, you know, even though it was based on a one-person play, the way the story is written is filmed is we have three actors playing Lewis. We have a boy Lewis, wonderful Eddie Ray Martin. Then we have a young man Lewis, played by Nicholas Ralph, who is just starring as I can't remember the lead in All Creatures Great and Small. He's marvelous as that. We have Tolkien and Barfield cast. We have obviously Kirkpatrick and the mom and dad and young Warney. So you know, there's the show has 15 actors. We had 190 extras, 270 different costumes in 20 different locations in and around Oxford. So it's, you know, it's going to feel it's beautifully filmed. You know, it was filmed in the fall, which is a great time of year. I think people will be nostalgic about Oxford after seeing the film.
I think so. Well, and shows like Inspector Morse and Endeavor and others, you know, have made great use of Oxford. And I love some of the production photos that I've seen where, you know, you have the streets more or less empty. So
yeah, it was very interesting because we weren't allowed to have, you know, we had scenes where we wanted large crowds on the street, you know, but the Oxford city government wouldn't let us do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we could have one person. So what we did is we had different people walking at different times. And
that's great. I would have been happy to, you know, show up for that. Next time, just, you know, give me a call. So, of course, Nicholas Ralph played James Harriet.
That's it, right?
In All Creatures. Right. Yep. So looking forward, what have you got? We're happy and excited to hear that there'll be more films from FPA. Yeah. What about other productions? Will there be a Most Reluctant Convert Volume 2? What other things?
Well, it's you know, we wanted to continue to tell the Lewis story, and so I've been working for the past probably 2 years on a sequel to The Most Reluctant Convert, which is trying to discover how Lewis, you know, it was not obvious that when Lewis converted, you know, on the sidecar motorcycle in September 1931, which by the way, his 90th anniversary is coming up.
That's right.
Of his conversion. It wasn't obvious that he was going to become the great Christian writer apologist, probably the most influential and effective Christian writer of the 20th century. That was just not obvious. And so how did that happen? And so this story attempts to stitch that together. And so it's been a challenge, but it's been a wonderful challenge because the name of it is C.S. Lewis on Stage, Further Up, Further In. And I've just been so inspired and blessed by the insights that it has. His own doubts, his own self-deprecation. And so I really am very, very excited about getting. So the plan right now is that the script is just about done, and it's changed quite a bit over the course of the last 6 months. And we're going to start workshopping it this fall, and we hope to premiere it in March. Actually, we're going to try to premiere it in Houston and then do a national tour. And then, boy, you're getting a big scoop here, Andrew. And then bring it to New York sometime after that. So that's
fantastic.
The plan.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, and of course, it goes without saying, if I can ever serve in any way, on that, I'm always available for that. I love how after the conversion, what happens to Lewis is this kind of solid surrounding of friends. And I'm working on a paper for Northwind right now about Lewis's first criticism of Tolkien's poetry in 1929. I mean, before the conversions. And but how, like Diana Glyer talks about with Bandersnatch, how Lewis served as a resonator and an encourager and an editor, and that really solidified their friendship. And that friendship, in some ways, kind of characterizes the 30s and 40s with him. I can't wait to hear, to see what you do with that. So, another point of prayer for us.
Amen.
So, if budget and permission from the Lewis estate were no object, what project would you love to do?
I think I'd love to have a crack at a film version of the Screwtape Letters.
Wow. Okay.
That one, I think it would be an evergreen project that, particularly if you stay close to the book, but nevertheless find the theatrical arc of it, that I think it would really serve the kingdom in a very powerful way.
Yeah, well, and I think that you already have such a great leg up at portraying that in an effective way, and because there's so much material in there that you didn't touch for the stage play, that I think that there's more. Should you want it, I think there are more scenes that could be developed. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Max, it's been such a joy. We really want to know, I really want our listeners to know where we can go to find out and to help, because this is not, especially with the canceling of so many tickets, this is not a huge profit producing enterprise, I imagine. What can we do as listeners and as devotees of Lewis and fans of your work? What can we do?
Well, I would, we have our Fellowship for Performing Arts, short FPA. We have a website. We're a theatrical production company, as you mentioned earlier, and based in New York, and we tour regularly. And of course, we're right now touring the C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. It's going to be in Colorado Springs, Kansas City, Tulsa, LA, San Francisco area, Phoenix, Oklahoma City, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Grand Rapids, Cleveland. So we're going to be pretty all over the place this fall. So come see our shows when we're in your area at FPA Theater, theatre.com. It's not because we're highbrow we use the British spelling. It's because theater with an R-E is the art, theater with an E-R is the building. So we make that distinction. and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. So anyway, do that, and of course, please remember November 3rd, our film debut, C.S. Lewis, The Most Reluctant Convert, and you can get more information on our film at cslewismovie.com. cslewismovie.com.
We'll include all of those links for folks. And yeah, we'd love to do that. Do you also take support from just, donors and supporters?
Yeah, you can find out more about our work at fpatheater.com, fpatheater.com with an RE. You can find out more about who we are, what we do, why we do it. Produce theater from a Christian worldview, meant to engage a diverse audience. And when that's your mission, you land pretty heavily on C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. Well, and pretty excellently, if you ask me. Well,
thank you,
Max. What a joy! I'm so grateful that you would make some time. It's great to renew our friendship once again, and I look forward to more of that coming in the days to come. So we're going to wrap up now, and so listeners, we just invite you to join us next time when we'll be going further up
and further in.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, 1 minute till we shoot. Thank you, guys. Let's be ready.
All right.
Final checks, please, Harry.
Is this my chair?
So have a red light and bell, please.
Where's my phone? Who has my phone?
Roll sound.
All right, how's my hair? How's my hair? Good.
All right, nice and quiet, please. Ready for a take. Cameras are rolling. Set. One take one.
Mark it. Quiet. Stand by. And action.
Cheers.
William Kirkpatrick, the Great Knock.
When we set out, I did not believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. The world and the flesh had made their appearance. Now came the devil.
Sony to lead.
That night, as I read Phantastes, my imagination was baptized. The rest of me took a little longer.
Thanks again so much to Max McLean for coming on the show. And thanks to all of you for listening, and especially to our Patreon supporters, particularly our top tier supporters, Shane, John, Kevin, Brian, Kay, Monique, Paul, Kimberly, Gilliam, Gary, Jake, Stephen, Matt, Jeff, Kelly, Chris, John, James, Kate, and Rowdy. We encourage you to follow us on social media, and you can always find more about the podcast at pintswithjack.com, and that's where you can shoot us a message, listen to past episodes, and pick up some very lovely merchandise.